thank you everybody for being here this afternoon. I'm hanging in there. I have the last session of the day and it's a full day outside. So thank you for joining me for a little bit to share the story of Beecher Terrace as far as the Section 106 story goes with that. And as Nicole said, I actually, it's an interesting turn of events that I was the historic preservation officer for Louisville Metro when the project first came about. And I got to work on it until 2022 when I left to go work for FEMA. And subsequently, I've just returned back to Kentucky to start working with HPH engineers, who actually was one of the project managers for the Beecher Terrace site undertaking Fort Island archaeology. So it's a very interesting connection that's woven through for me to be able to come back and speak about it. Do give me some grace because it's been 3 years since I've been completely immersed in Beecher Terrace. So I think it's been fun to go back down memory lane with it as well. So just to give you some orientation about the area that we're talking about, it is in downtown Louisville. The Russell neighborhood is one of our historic neighborhoods in West Louisville. And it was originally a mixed race neighborhood over time. It eventually became more of an African American neighborhood into the 20th century, but it actually has a very interesting history in the sense of there was like middle class and upper class Black families lived in Russell in the 19th century. So that ties into some of what we'll find on the Beecher Terrace site. So it really reveals a lot of history that had really not been studied very much previously or not really at all. So it really is given an opportunity for the community to connect to something that maybe they didn't think about themselves in the same way. We have a history too, and so this is really been a wonderful opportunity to bring that about and raise people's consciousness about that. And I should say, well, it's also a business district. So Russell is right next to downtown Louisville. But there is 9th Street, which is called the 9th Street Divide. Louisville has a complicated history with how we've treated people in the past. And part of the Russell redevelopment project is trying to right those wrongs. So the 9th Street Divide is a street that is altered quite a bit to make a big separation between downtown and the rest of the neighborhood. That is also being worked on to be improved now to better connect this area with downtown and also to make Russell become its own significant spot and revitalize that. So this is kind of there's a bigger synergy in this whole project. But it's a big, beautiful architecture in Russell. There's a lot of Italian age architecture and shotgun houses. There are bungalows as well. And then there are lots of corner stores, historic corner stores. I wish I had gotten a picture of Chestnut Street in the spring when the trees are blooming. It's one of the most beautiful streets in Louisville in the spring. So if you back around Chestnut in the Russell neighborhood next spring, please do take a drive down it. It's gorgeous. But there's a lot of history in the neighborhood as well. Lots of civil rights leaders were associated with the Russell neighborhood. So it's got a rich urban fabric that is, I can't even cover everything about it. It's a really wonderful spot. Then, of course, because it's historic, we have several National Register districts in the Russell neighborhood. I believe people here that are working to expand that area for consideration. But the main core, the Russell Historic District, is you can see in the purple. There's also the Lower West Market Street corridor, which is a commercial district. Sadly, a lot of there's been a lot of demolition along there, but there's still some hanging on. And then the Marble Place bungalows, which is the corner over there, really cool set of bungalows, California style kind of bungalows. So you can see there's a lot going on in the Russell neighborhood. But we also have the Beecher Terrace development, which becomes a historic district in most of our Section 106 process. So you can see what I've got here on the site right now is a map of what this neighborhood looked like before Beecher Terrace was developed. And Beecher Terrace, I'll give you a little bit more about that in a public housing development. So prior to that time, in the 30s, there were 380 residences on the site. So you can see the density of the properties, and like I said before, it's racially mixed. So there are actually European, Eastern European, Jewish folks that are also in this neighborhood, and it's working class. So it's going to yield a lot of information for us from now on, because what's drawing out of the ground here. But it's also got a couple other little interesting trinkets in here. I'll get to in a second. But just to say that the public housing aspect of Beecher Terrace started in the 1930s out of the New Deal programs when there was really addressing the needs of housing crisis as it is today. But it was like this was a New Deal program that started to develop public housing across the country. And when we think about public housing today, we sort of have negative connotations a lot of times about it. But it really comes from there is a really this rich history to it, and some of the meaning behind it was good, and some of it was not good. So know that it's complex. But the people that grew up in public housing, units, they have as a community. And so being cognizant of that and the history that people carry with them, in the communities there, just was somebody else said earlier about people, it's about the people. So this place has a lot of meaning to a lot of people, and even though it may have had some bad things happen, it still was people's homes. So in Louisville, there was the Clarksdale project. That's I guess I'm not sure longer. You're right. And so that was the first one, and so Beecher Terrace becomes the second public housing project developed in Louisville. Deal interest, and there is kind of well, sorry, a second. So, but I told you there were a couple other things going on this site. One of them, we could see that the layout of the whole property, and first the red line is the boundaries for the Beecher Terrace site. Actually, looking at the historical history. But there was you'll see up there the Baxter Square Park, and that site was not only a park, but it was also the site of Louisville's first cemetery, the Pioneer Cemetery, which back in the 19th century, it becomes a park. So the power of cemetery laws, as they've changed over time, you can see in the 19th century, Louisville knew this was the Pioneer Cemetery, but they decided that the city's like, we're going to make a park here. And so that becomes a layered history that's there, and then it also becomes the first homestead park through Louisville. So that becomes a more complicated even in our Section 106 process of how we're going to deal with that. Those layers of history. Obviously, the cemetery is paramount. There are people still buried there, and so that factors into our discussion in the Section 106 process. And so there's a picture of Baxter Square, the park being utilized. And this is after the tornado, so it's why the trees look pretty bad. And we see the buildings behind it, which that becomes Beecher Terrace. So you can see that it's one of the cornerstones from Beecher Terrace, and it's PWA Association of the New Deal. The DX Murphy's, one of Louisville's noted architects who was involved in the design of the complex. So what I was going to say was that after the New Deal, there was a lot of planning going on about how public housing should be arranged. And so the plan for Beecher Terrace follows a lot along other public housing projects across the country, including the super block. So they disrupted the grid of the city to build the properties so that they're inward facing, creating courtyards for the people that live there. And that's actually the idea was that was a good thing to do, to give people green space and have a place where they can be a pedestrian and not have to worry about vehicles coming through there. And also created a park-like space. There was also a community center, which I'll show you a picture of in just a second. And the idea was that the thinking, of course, it was perceived that the neighborhood, the housing stock that was there was substandard, and replacing the substandard slums with new modern housing was going to improve people's lives. So there's a good purpose behind that, but it also has a history of maybe corralling people into one spot, and people that in the segregation story that is all about, because it happens in Louisville with redlining. So again, another complex part of the history. But the buildings themselves were ultra modern at the time, and during, of course, the modified streamlined modern styling. But I didn't get any interior shots. I think you can go on the website and see them. It's really interesting. It was like state-of-the-art housing. The kitchens particularly were featured, and they just very much a place where people wanted to make sure they get a place there. And also the community center that is there, Baxter Community Center, is like a locus of activity. It is also the Art Deco style, and the community. We go there. There are lots of events happening there. People would dress up in the refinery and go. It's like jazz club kind of flavor. So it's very much a centerpiece all along with the development. So hopefully it gives you a little bit of sense of how we are arriving at Beecher Terrace in the Section 106 process. So Louisville Metro government recognizes that there's been a lot of disinvestment in Russell neighborhood over the years, and we want to be proactive and start to help improve the neighborhood and really invest in it. So the Vision Russell process was initiated, and there was funding from HUD, Housing and Urban Development, federal funding, to start the study. And actually, it was more than just the housing site itself. It's the whole neighborhood, and it's actually the Choice Neighborhood Grant that's associated with this is a way to help other investors, small investors like mom and pop people, that people from the neighborhood to invest in the properties to rehab them. So there's a lot of planning that was going on. 2 years in the making of conversations with the neighborhood and the stakeholders about what direction do people in this neighborhood want the development to go in. So that already set a good stage for us in the Section 106 process for our public involvement. So if you ever have the opportunity, if you're involved in Section 106, get ahead of the ball. If you know something's coming down the pipe, start working with the community way in advance, because you can really get some better interactions with folks. And also, you build a relationship with people, especially as a government person, the government, but you start really making connections with people, and you meet the people in the neighborhood that are also going to help you be, they're the ambassadors in the neighborhood to help connect you with other people, and then you get lots of great stories and lots of great information from people. So highly recommend that. And I should have asked, has anybody done Section 106, like in a consulting party? Or, okay, good, okay. Anybody have to run the process? Anybody a responsible entity? Okay, well, I didn't know I was going to be either until 2017. I was told, hey, Cynthia, you're the preservation officer. You're going to get involved in this Section 106 process. Like, oh, okay, this is great. I worked on with our CDBG funding, like we had a program agreement with the SHPO. So this will be great. It's easy. No, I was naive. But what this site has is everything you could possibly ask for in the Section 106 experience and more. So it was actually a really great learning opportunity for me to really learn the process and really learn the value of the key underpinning of Section 106, which is that public involvement. So I can't stress that enough. You see, of course, a little bit more detail of how the planning was going and what we were doing in that 2-year process to kind of identify nodes and things to do. There are other parts, spin-off projects from the money, the funding that come out of the project. So when we get to the consultation process, Nicole touched on this as well. She gave you a good overview of how that works, and when you identify, initiate the process first, and then identify the undertaking. In that process, in this case, we kind of merged those things together a little bit. But we did get the public involved with an initial kickoff meeting to give an overview of what Section 106 is and how they could be involved. And At that point, we'd already started working on, actually, had already started working on the identification of the archaeological site and also the cultural historic resources. So we were able to actually do some shares of information on that. And in that process, we also invited folks to become consulting parties along the way. So this introductory meeting was just to get open to the community. We did lots of outreach in any way we possibly could to get people involved so they could be notified about what was happening in the neighborhood, and also to have to let them know we're going to have an opportunity to participate. So of course, the details of it, APE, area of potential effect, was identified, and also our indirect effects. So the yellow and blue we're talking about the archaeological site, and then the actual complex itself as a historic district that was identified. So think about all those residences that were there before the development. That's our archaeology side. So the whole site is an archaeological site, and then we have the historic buildings that are also there that are going to be demolished for new public housing, or new mixed-use housing. And then we have the indirect effects in that pipeline. So we're going to consider what's going on, what effect will this actually have on those properties surrounding it. And there's a lot of historic sites that are also surrounding this property. So we have to take that into consideration. And so our team at Kern Island Archaeology, they put together both reports for the archaeology and above ground cultural historic reports, and see what that's a show. To get the ball rolling on giving us some guidance and feedback about what we need to do next. And we make the recommendation that it's an adverse event, and Chibo's agreeing with us. And that takes it on to a whole different layers of information to show you that the actual historic site. You saw those pictures of the buildings before. They were altered quite a bit over time. You see the vinyl siding, the gable roofs, replacement windows. You might think like, well, that doesn't really look like it did. But when you think about it in the sense of the events and history, what would we say that an A nomination, that's why it's historic, and also just kind of that tangible sort of piece about what this place was for people. So there is a lot of significance that was associated with it, as well as the archaeology piece with the underground plumbing, prior occupation on that site. So of course demolition results in adverse event. Now I don't want you to get the wrong impression about this photo. We didn't start demolishing before we completed our Section 106 process. But this so please do not start your projects before you get concurrence and sign-offs and everything. So please keep that in mind. And so we know we have an adverse effect. We're going to have to develop a programmatic agreement with this property because of those multiple layers that are associated with this particular development project. We knew kind of what the effects were going to be to the immediate conditions on the side of the buildings and the archaeological side, but we also are going to have new buildings going on this site, and we have to consider how those are going to affect historic properties. But at this point, we don't know what those things look like. So that puts us into a programmatic agreement process. And then that, of course, gives us a roadmap of how we're going to conduct our Section 106 process from that point forward, and gives us ways to deal with our mitigation treatments, and also how we're going to deal with the next phase of the project. We're going to have to then reconsider, okay, we're doing this part of the project, how is this affecting historic properties? So that which becomes a letter of resolution. So you can get deep into the details. We have a website set up. I'll show you at the very end. If you really want to get into it, there's a lot of great information. So again, we're going to get back to the community part of this because we know we have this adverse effect. We know we're going to have to do mitigation. We can't avoid this. We can't minimize it. We're going forward with it. As Nicole said, Section 106 doesn't stop the project. But we know we're losing historic properties in this process. So the key piece here is the public. And you definitely want to make sure you involve the public and get their feedback. It's not just about giving information to them about, okay, we're doing this, okay, we told you, bye. you want to really engage with them. You really want people to have an opportunity to tell their stories. You can get a wide array of stories. Some things are not related to the specifics of the problem, but listen to folks because it's a meaningful process for them. And it may be the way that they start engaging and realizing that they can be part of a government process, a public process. It's the first opportunity they ever had to do that. So it really gives them a chance to have a meaningful conversation and also guide what happens with the project. So as I said, we have the convenient little graphic here. So we're going through these steps. We've initiated actually Beecher Terrace. We initiated it. We've identified the properties. We're assessing those adverse effects, and we're going to resolve those adverse effects with a programmatic agreement. And in that PA that we're going to outline our mitigation activities, at least for this first phase of the project. And so that this is kind of where the rubber meets the road as far as really can derive. We did share with the consulting parties that this plan changed a bazillion times during the process. So it was like they were moving the little redevelopment pieces around all over the different things. You can see that the cemetery / park is always staying in the same spot. It's still there and it's an unresolved spot. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but the community center is that little purple building, and then you can see that the rest of the housing part of it. And the other kind of cool thing about this project is they're reestablishing the street pattern, the street grid for connectivity for the whole rest of the neighborhood into downtown, so that they can really has an extra benefit to the greater community as well. So we've got this handy brochure, I believe, Leslie Barris, who's a great person in Louisville, an attorney and a very much committed to historical preservation, has helped put together the Citizens Guide brochure. I highly recommend it if you do have a Section 106 process that happens in your neighborhood. Either if you're a citizen who want to participate, or you're the official that you're trying to get people interested. Share this guide because it really is an approachable way for people to start understanding how they can get involved. It's really a great resource to have. We did share that obviously with our people too. So once we have our PA in place, that happened over about 6 meetings. Goes through a process of attorneys signing off on it, and the mayor's signing it. And in this case, we got the ACHP involved, which was a pretty big deal. They wanted to be a participant in this Section 106 process, so the big government. And then we also had tribes signing on as well. They ended up not having anything, proclamations showing them on the site, but they definitely want to make sure they could be part of it and participate in case we had something discovered. They would definitely want to be able to consult. So our PA had a lot of people signing off on it, and we also had mitigation partners that sign on it, and then all of our consulting parties, our community people that had that interest in historical preservation or something about the neighborhood. So we have a lot of local residents that are signers to our programmatic agreement. So we started after that. We at our meetings, we were just running what's going on, and we also have the website set up. So we also have the interface for folks. Anybody in the neighborhood could access that at any time. And also with our meetings section, kind of so it's happening before the pandemic, but we were sharing our information on meetings online, and of course, definitely share that out during the pandemic. Some of our consulting parties were virtual openings. Remember those days. So one of the things that we're going to do on the site, of course, is the data recovery for the archaeology. And I'm not an archaeologist, but I'm also an archaeological adjacent. But this is actually one of the cool, to me, it's one of the coolest things. This is an urban neighborhood. Like I was saying, there's so many properties on here and so much history of the people that were there. So the study of like going lot by lot. The archaeologists are looking at that and they're getting the information about how they're going to approach this site. We know we're not going to be able to get data recovery from the whole site. They're going to kind of narrow and figure out what themes, what kinds of information we don't have about certain people. We wanted to know more information from this opportunity, really, to do that. And like I said, there was like the African American settlement and lifeways. Both you have the working class and the more middle class and upper class community of the Black community. This is like a really great, information that we didn't have before. And then also Eastern European folks, Jewish population, and then actually the early pioneering aspect was also something that was interesting. We did have a separate kind of consulting party process with experts that are archaeology focused people, because and I was sitting on those. It's really cool to be a part of it and to listen to how they were narrowing down how we're going to approach the sites and the kind of walks they were going to do. So out of that, again, we were being chased by bulldozer, I guess, Port Island was. So the set up a demolition plan for this project. Once we decided what sites we were going to do, so our analysts would get out on one part of the project and do the dig. Probably not the so, but after that, you can see all the cool things that come out of the ground, essentially, cisterns and privies. I've learned over time are like really, especially privies, really cool stuff. That's where all the fun stuff is, but also building foundations for showing up, and these are obviously very carefully done and recorded. Taking the layers and information, and then you get to the artifacts that came out of that, and thousands of artifacts come out of the Beecher Terrace site. I know that Corn Island / HMB is still processing those things, those pieces, and it really, this is like one of those tangible things that people can really start dialing into about, like, hey, this was in my community, and then kind of first and where they was coming out of the ground. And also, there's some other cool things that show you the lifeways of how people were living at that time. And although we have the cemeteries, I said, the Pioneer Cemetery, there were no real stones sticking up on the ground anymore. So that had to be surveyed to make sure that we were not, there's going to be development around the cemetery. You want to make sure you're not building anything on that cemetery along the boundary per se, because then they have to do the archaeology on the cemetery and the history there along with it. That's like I said, it's still in the process about what's happening there. But in the course of the data recovery, what Corn Island, what we agreed to in the Section 106 process is they have a public facing piece of that, so that people can interact with the archaeology as it's happening. And that's a really neat thing for people to really connect with in the neighborhood. Now, this site was a little bit more complicated because you couldn't really have people just wandering around on the site. So they set up specific times and days to have people visit and do archaeology day. People didn't really get to go behind the fence and do the actual work themselves, but they got to interact with archaeologists, get to ask questions, and this poster was put up for people, anybody walking by could get this kind of basic information about what we're doing here, what's happening, and what's coming out of it, and then also kind of be able to connect more into how these artifacts, what was going to happen to them next, so people will be informed. One of the coolest things I loved about this project was Artifact of the Week. So during the time that the excavations were going on, the archaeologists would find really cool stuff, and we put this on the website. And so anybody could access this information. So you get really in-depth history about what these pieces are and how they connect to the site. So I find that was a good kind of nice outcome about the whole thing, even in the data recovery phase, how people could interact with it, and also that still exists on the website today. We have displays that are developed out of the project too, and that's the kind of they could travel around to different parts of town, and we have some museums that would take them for display. And actually on the site itself, Beecher Terrace, the community center, having a permanent display there, and also some neighborhood development on the site. Western Library is also in the Russell neighborhood. I'll get to in a second. So, that's kind of classic section 106, across the mitigation, especially with archaeology. You're going to have that should be a given in public. That you are going to get that data recovery and you're going to share that information with the public about it. What came out of the conversations with the community of how we capture the adverse effects to the loss of the historic buildings is a real interesting outcome of how we got there. And so we have residents that live in Beecher Terrace, and Louisville White is one of those folks, and he's a filmmaker. So he put together a movie, a film, about the Beecher Terrace story, which is very real. It's no sugarcoating. It's like the good, the bad, the wonderful, the ugly, and what's happening on that site. So he was able to see the world histories from people and get the stories and get that documented in a way that people can have that for perpetuity. And so that was a really great way to have somebody that actually grew up in Beecher Terrace be that person to document and capture the story of what Beecher Terrace was like, what it was like to live there, and how the future was going to look. And I should say, the redevelopment project was a concerted effort to make sure that the people that lived at Beecher Terrace would have the first right to come back to the site, come back to the new development. So this was one of the keys in that, as far as you can sense the connection people have with this place. And so you take that away, it's like the big so long community. So it was very good that was thought about as well. The Western Library Archives, that project came out of, there was already a lot of archival information at the Western Library, which is located in Russell neighborhood. And a lot of African-American leaders information there, but it was really a way to organize it, make it more accessible for people, get things scanned online for people, for researchers. So again, opens up a lot more information that people didn't have access to, or we're not able to show up at Western Library at 11 a.m. This was a way to get the information together. And Natalie, the librarian, and she was really great about making sure the archives can look accessible to folks, and really improving the process to reach that information. And then our other project came out of the consulting partners was the local story program, and this was about collecting photographs from people in the neighborhood. And Darcy Thompson did other projects in the global story program, but was originally called Cornerstones Across the World, because if you write the letter, send it here in the final product. So he produced out of the consulting part of the process this book. And it also, not only the photographs, but the stories and people that provided information and art. So we have people from the neighborhood giving those stories and making those connections with the photographs, and kind of the theme of the themed way that I'm talking music and how the stores and the commercial business and how people relate to those things. So it was a way to really capture something that would be lost in a lot of ways if people made the connections for people. So this is available for anybody today for sale, but it's also just something that people have access to that's really interesting. And I'd say what was kind of really cool about all three of those two projects I just mentioned, plus Port Island's archaeology, was there was a big synergy that came out of that. All of those projects, that the people running those projects connected, and they started doing kind of their own spin-off community events out of these projects. So it was fun over the time of our quarterly meetings we had, where they would get together and they would start sharing, like, well, we're going to do this, lecture series, and it's like, wow, you guys are you're connecting on levels that wasn't you told them to do that. It was like they're doing that anyways, and so the neighborhood was getting more and more engaged with that, and it was really helping give people a sense of place and pride that maybe they didn't have. Like so much had been said about Beecher Terrace that might be negative, and some people feel like I lived here, but it's like, no, I lived here. There's a lot that's about this place that's important and special, and it has a lot of meaning for people. So I think that was a kind of a cool side effect of the whole Section 106 process, was that they were working together. It wasn't just little silos. We're just doing a national determination over here, and nobody's been able to see the consumption or research. So this is the kind of thing that has much more of a community touchstone for people. And then the other piece that came out of it was the education curriculum. And there was with our JCPS, Jefferson County Public Schools, and then our archaeology team worked together to develop modules for educating kids at fifth grade. But it was like, again, the themes that are identified, and then you have little boxes of the artifacts to share. So there's this tangible connection, and then the discussions of the whole module and how questions, and getting the kids to think about, like how this connects to them. And so again, I was talking about like the next generation of preservationists. What's happening here is this is one of those things where kids are starting to connect with history, and then they hadn't thought about. And so this is, a great outcome. We talk about the consulting partner meetings, and I should say that we talk about all these projects at each quarterly meeting, the intelligent progress updates, get information from people that are participating. Maybe somebody come up with a different idea through that consulting party meeting that took us in. They're like, oh, this gives us more information we didn't know about. So that ongoing dialogue with the community, really super important. And I'll say, as I go, as the time went on, we didn't survive the pandemic with it. We started seeing, maybe not everybody was participating, but we also still had access to it online, and they could still write to us. We still had comment periods where people could send us their written comments at the end of the meeting. So we were able to continue our abide by the Section 106 process, but also have it actually be something very positive. And then I'll say our last piece, which is just kind of this is what I talked about the different phases. This is an example. So we were able to have the Vassar Community Center not be subject to demolition, which was good. When you were talking about that, I know I said no, don't do that. And lots of other people said that too, because here we have this one tangible piece that's left of this whole public housing development that still has a connection to the community, where people always had loved being there. There's like basketball and arts programs and music. So it was really important to keep this building and all this part of the project. So it becomes embedded within the redevelopment project, and it's also there's an addition that is proposed to be put on it. So we got to actually initiate some of our second phase, our letter of resolution process. They had been outlining our programmatic agreement, so we were able to work with SHPO and then kind of design phases. And was check in with them before things got too far along. Sometimes you have developers that have already have their vision ready to go. Like, oh wait, no, we got to talk to SHPO about that. And in this case, it's very well done. Our text really. Okay, yes, there may be changes that need to be made, working with the SHPO staff. And also we've shared this information with our consulting parties, and again, let them have an opportunity to comment. And also engage with SHPO, the determination effect. Are we creating a new adverse effect or not? So the process is very strong. I'd say our programmatic agreement is super helpful. It's a great roadmap to help guide me. I know since I was this near me, but it was also great for everybody involved. We have a lot of opinions and a lot of actually better design in this case because of that consulting party process. We just loved it. To make the developer, a little bit different, but we really came together nicely. So I just wanted to reiterate for the mitigation outcomes of it, and just the Section 106 mitigation affords the community a chance to have an outcome that preserves a tangible piece of history associated with the historical sources. So it really becomes more of a touchstone for people, more of a way to connect in a way that they can think. So while we're losing that historic site, we're also gaining some more, something out of it, and it does cost money. And so obviously we have to factor that in. We're doing Section 106 mitigation. If you can foresee that you're going to have an adverse effect, let the person that's the applicant know as so they can start putting together estimates. The Louisville Metro Housing Authority is our partner in this. They're great. They were never questioned any of the mitigation that we had. It was proposed. It was like, yes, we're definitely doing this. So we have great applicants that are totally willing to do that because they recognize what they're bringing something to the community, but they're also taking something away. So they want to make sure they have that good connection. So, and then as I promised, the website. So it's on the Vision Russell website, visionrussell.org. If you want to go there sometime, if you have the Section 106 process coming up, you're like, hey, how's that go? You can go and check under the Historic Preservation tab, and then pull down and bring up Section 106 is one of the line items there, and there's a whole lot of documentation. I will say there were some broken links from the early days. Touch with the housing authority, say, hey, but it's a really great resource to have, even and we'll live there as long as we got the internet. And so I think that's really helpful for people to be able to see the process, see how it played out, and all the time that was invested in it, which was that the community really made this project happen. You know, it was just me and the developer going to ship out. We would have missed so much of what was really important about that. So I can't stress enough how much having the community be a part of this process is wonderful. It's a gift of the National Preservation Act that we have in Section 106. Don't be scared. And with that, I'll bring it up to any questions I can answer. Well, thank you very much for your time and attention. Yes, Jay.
Well, I don't have a question, but I wanted to just give a little perspective on this project and how much of it is yeah, so it's a great, it's a great case study because the way this, there's another piece to this is that there was a project in Russell before where they tried to revitalize things, and I was involved in archaeology. That was in 1990, and here you had a housing authority that was trying to just check the boxes. Right? Oh, we have to do archaeology, send archaeologists out there and do that. And that was one of the first archaeology projects I was on. And I complained about the fact that people didn't know we were out there. They didn't know why we were there. And it was a really lost opportunity to engage with the community. And what they got out of it was they actually had failure. Because they did infill with suburban looking houses and no community engagement at all. It was a disaster. And one of the reasons for that was because they didn't really have someone like a Cynthia to do that 106 process. So it underscores how important it is to have for these communities and for cities to have a CLT program or a historic preservation officer. Because they can help manage the systems and really get the most out of the Section 106 process. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Beecher Terrace project was so much different than what I experienced when in 1990, was that there was someone like you there who could really get the most out of it.
When you lived it both times, Jay.
Yeah, I was wondering, could you address how you dealt with community members that didn't necessarily agree with one another? When you got a consulting party, so we had a community that maybe had different perspectives, so I'm pretty sure you had that.
Yeah, we were talking about here. We did have, there was some, by the time we were getting into after the kind of the program agreement and development, the quarter meetings, I think we were all in a pretty good spot. But those early days, and people like, what's happening to the site, what do we do? There were some differences of opinion of how we're going to approach it, and I think the main takeaway is that obviously you're going to listen to people and you're going to take their comments, but the process allows us to. We're consulting. We're not trying to run over what somebody's saying. But you also have to communicate to folks like, hey, well, be transparent, explain why we're going to have to make the decision this way. This is the law that's in place. This is what we can do. This is what we can't do. I mean, I think that's Any kind of government interaction with the community, you're gonna, you know, at whatever level it is, you're gonna have to be, you know, direct with people, but also don't dismiss them. Because people have valid points. It's their valid point. It's not me to judge, like, you know, you're wrong. No, it's not. It's like that, they've got their opinion and respect it. So I would say never try to push somebody away in this process or any public process. You definitely want to take those voices into consideration, and then try to mediate as much as possible. I think really giving the facts behind something, really explaining. We need to go back and go through, like, this is how we arrived at this decision. This is your part in this decision. But we move forward with this. But that's was my experience with it. I don't know if you're thinking of something specific or not. Okay.
That was it. I mean, it's like any time you have a public engagement process, you're gonna have complexity of perspectives.
Right.
And just because they're communicating, doesn't mean that's going to be an easy process.
No.
So you have to work through that. And that's one of the hard things for someone who's in your position. And it's also hard for those participants. But at the end of the day, you hope that, you know, everyone is satisfied that they've heard and that the outcome is acceptable.
Exactly.
It's never going to be perfect for every person.
But I do feel like the outcomes of this project, the community feedback, as things got rolling, I think people were like appreciative that their voices were heard and that they did have that opportunity. I think part of it was also that kind of initial planning phase that was the bigger project that was going on, helped to get us the community, because as Jay's saying, there's some real negative past. And so people were very, very suspicious and, like, well, we're going to have him say this. So that was a conscious effort of the whole metros and the housing authorities, thinking about how we're going to approach it this time, make it different for people.
Are there any other questions?